Hello, friends. This is Doug Schaible, and welcome to the Premature Bible Institute. Trust that you've had a good week. We've had a lot of little things going on here at the home with having to fix things because of a hailstorm, but that's just life, and that's what happens as things go on. And just thinking about what lessons we've had so far, we've really come an awful long way as far as history goes. The lesson that we're teaching today is probably about, a couple of thousand years, maybe a little more, since Adam and Eve sinned. So 2 millennia have passed now, and we're coming into another major character. So we just got through finishing up with the Tower of Babel, and we're going to jump probably about 1,000 years to another event. It isn't that the events in between there aren't important and the Bible talks about, but as far as their redemptive plan, we're just going to keep this where it's going because there are some places where we need to stop and really dwell on those because they're very important subjects to talk about. And but God is keeping his redemptive plan going, and he's not leaving mankind without a deliverer or a promise of one. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a lineage for that deliverer. And so that's been continuing on up until now. So a lot of things have happened. And if you and I had probably been around at the time of the event that we're going to talk about today, we would have probably wondered, why is God taking so long in order to bring this deliverer? And, that actually is a question that's still going on today, is if God is going to do what he's going to do, why hasn't he done it yet? And that's what we're going to be talking about. Because remember, God doesn't dwell in time, he dwells in eternity. And there's a big difference. So everything is the same to him. It doesn't make any difference whether it's a billion years or a microsecond, a nanosecond. It's all the same to him. He dwells in eternity. And so that's where where he lives. That's where he exists. And God isn't rushed by anybody. He doesn't get pushed into things. He doesn't do things out of reaction. He does things according to a plan. And that doesn't mean he determines everything in the plan. And by that, I don't mean this. Sometimes when we talk about the sovereignty of God, we think that God has to control everything that happens. And I think it's more the idea that nothing, let me put it this way, God never loses control of what happens. Even my choices that I make are figured in there. Not that he makes me make that choice, but even my choice fulfills part of his plan. And that's a part of being omniscient and perfect and knowing everything there is to know. So we want to keep talking about that, and the plan is continuing on. And so today we're going to be talking about somebody else. Now, in the last lesson, we saw that from the flood until the Tower of Babel was only about 100 years, but look how far they had removed themselves from God in just 100 years. They moved to the east and they decided to stop somewhere rather than scatter abroad. And he says, we're all one language, we're going to make a name for ourselves. So we're going to build this tower and we're going to worship the God that we decide is the one we should worship. And his name was Marduk. And so we want to talk about that. And so as time goes on, we see God acting and doing things, and he comes down, he sees what they're doing. And like I said, he didn't have to come down to see anything. He already knew it. But what he's doing is kind of giving us an idea of this is what I'm going to do. I'm involving myself in this event. And he confuses the languages. He scatters everybody throughout the whole earth. And now we got all these languages that missionaries like us have to sit down and try and figure out when we go to different places. So my wife and I were very privileged to be one of those people who helped figure out a language, and along with our partners, the Wolves. And so it was kind of an exciting thing to be able to go to a place where a language had been developed by God, and we got to break it down. And so that was kind of fun, and tell them God's talk in his language, in their language, I'm sorry. So another 1,000 years pass, and remember, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And one of Shem's descendants was a man by the name of Abram. And we're going to talk about Abram. And the Bible gives us a little bit about their genealogy. So it does tell us what their genealogy is, but I wanted to specifically talk about a little bit of one here right now. So in Genesis 11, verses 27 through 30, it says this. This is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begot Abram. Nahor, and Haran. So a man by the name of Terah had three sons, and one's name was Abram, another was Nahor, and another one was Haran, or Haran. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And Haran begot Lot. In other words, Haran had a son by the name of Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. So this family came from a place called Ur in the Chaldeans. And there are actually places where you can go and see where the ancient city of Ur really was. And so Terah was the father of these people, and he had three sons. And one of them, by the name of Haran, he died while they were still in Ur of the Chaldees, and he had a son by the name of Lot. Okay. Then Abram, one of his other sons, and Nahor, his other son, they took wives. In other words, they got married. And the name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. And she was the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren. She had no child. So within that culture, it was, and it probably even today to some degree, when a man and a woman get married, they generally and naturally want to think about having children many times. And when they do, sometimes it's hard for some people to conceive and have children. I had a friend who they couldn't have any children, so they adopted several children over their years. And 20 years after they were married, they were getting up there pretty good, and all of a sudden she gets pregnant, and it's a natural childbirth. And it was amazing, things that happen. So we used to have this joke. I can still remember the first time I heard it. It was in a church down in South Wichita, and this guy was talking about Milcah, which was Nahor's wife. And we won't talk about it in any of the lessons, but I'll just do this as a side. She had two sons, and their names were, I don't know how to pronounce them for sure. It's either Uz and Buzz or Ooze and Booze. I don't know which one. Kind of funny names, but we used to laugh because I can still remember this guy talking about how Uz and Buzz were the meanest men in all the Bible. And we're all sitting there looking at it, says, because Uz and Buzz did Milcah bear. And so we're all sitting there laughing in the audience. So Milcah bore two sons by the name of Uz and Buzz. So Uz and Buzz did Milcah bear. So anyway, it's just funny. That's a side note. May not be funny to you, but it was to us at the time. So anyway, but Sarai, who was Abram's wife, she couldn't have any children. And so they make mention of that. Now, Abram married Sarai, and like I said, she couldn't have any children, and this was kind of like a social embarrassment to some degree. Not that everybody looked down on her or anything like that, but there was always a kind of, oh, I'm sorry you can't have children type of mentality from a lot of people. So while they were there in Ur, they moved. Abram and his relatives started moving away from there, moving from Ur, on their way to Canaan, and we'll read that scripture here in just a minute. So Abram, Terah, who is Abram's father, and Lot and their families moved from Ur to Haran on their way to Canaan. Now there's a city by the name of Haran that they moved to, and they went there and they moved there. And it says this in Genesis 11, verses 31 and 32. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So Terah, the father of those three sons, he died in this place called Haran. Now remember, Terah had died, and his son Haran had also died in Ur of the Chaldees. So after they left, they went to this town or a place called Haran, and there Terah died, the father of all of them. And then God, well, I shouldn't say, and then God told him something, but now the Bible reveals something about what God had said to Abram, and it tells you why they left Ur of the Chaldees and were heading to Canaan. So in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it says this, Now the Lord had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. Now, that's what it says there. Read it again. Now the Lord had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. Now notice who God told Abram to leave. He told him to leave his family. He says, get out of your country, leave the place that you're from, where you were born, from your family, get away from your family, and from your father's house. So your family are all your relatives, but your father's house is your immediate relatives. Move away from them and go to a land that I'm going to show you. So that's what God was telling Abram to do. So that's their motive for leaving Ur of the Chaldees. But you notice that when they left, he didn't leave his family. He didn't leave his father's house. They went with him. Whether by compulsion that they just pressured him to go with them or not, I don't know. Or whether it was a cultural thing to take care of the family and he felt bad about that, but he didn't. So they left. And then when they were there, they went to Ur of the Chaldeans. I'm sorry, into Haran, and he died there. Terah did. So now it's just Abram that's left. Haran had died, and so on, and Lot went with him. So notice that God had told him. So God had actually spoken to Abram while he was still in Ur of the Chaldees, and that's when he told him to go. And so now they're leaving. So so God is speaking in the past tense here. And God had the right. Now here's the thing that we need to understand. God had the right to set the boundaries of the travel. In other words, God was the travel agent in this matter, if you want to put it that way. And he says, here, I'm making passage for you, but I'm not making passage for everybody else. So I want you to go, I want you to leave everything, and I want you to go to some place that I want you to go to. You won't know where it's at until you start going. So he did. And God was not going to fulfill his plan for Abram until he was living the way God had told him to do. In other words, unless he left his family and friends and so on and went to a land that he would tell him, then God was going to reveal everything. But for this time, he couldn't because he wasn't completely obedient in everything he said to do. And you got to have to remember, the place that they came from was an idolatrous place. They were worshiping Marduk, which is the same god they were worshiping in the Tower of Babel. And so he's dealing with them, and he doesn't want that influence involved in this. So God is telling him to go. So God made a promise to Abram. He said, and like I said, 1,000 years after the Tower of Babel, they're still worshiping Marduk, which is the same God, which is amazing. You'd think that after 1,000 years they'd figure out it doesn't work, but they don't, and that's the way people are. They get onto something and they keep doing it over and over and over and over again. So in spite of the people's rebellious attitude towards God, God was not going to abandon his promise that he would one day send a deliverer. And so he made that promise to Eve and Adam in the Garden of Eden. He made it to Noah and his family. He made the promise to, and now he's getting ready to make it to Abram. So, but what did he promise to Abram? Now there's something here. He's going to bring out something new and something different. I shouldn't say different. It's more revealing. This is something I think that, let me just stop for just a second. This is something I think we have to really sit down and consider. When God decides to reveal something, he reveals it. But the next thing that he reveals doesn't negate what he just said before, in the sense it is an expansion of what he's already revealed. So when God builds, starts with the foundation, and he keeps building upon it. And as time goes on, he's going to reveal more and more and more. And now he's getting ready to reveal a little bit more. So in Genesis 12:2, he says this, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. So we've got several things there that he mentioned. I will make you a great nation. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? And then he says, I will bless you and make your name great. Now think of that in contrast with the Tower of Babel. They're sitting there saying, let us stay here, let us build a tower, and let us make our own name great. So what they were trying to do was do it themselves. They were trying to make themselves great. And that's the difference between true biblical faith, I think, and man trying to work to earn God's favor. What happened is that when you try to make your own name great, you'll fail. But if you just do what God wants you to do, he'll make your name great in his own time, and it'll be great. And look at it. God wanted to make Abram's name great, but what was the result? Well, here we are, 4,000 years later, still talking about Abram, still teaching about him. Has his name become great? I'd say so. How many people do you know in history whose names have been carried on for 4,000 years? And with this type of thing. So we were still talking about him today, and in one day, and let me put it this way, he would be in the line of the deliverer. So his name would be included in that line in which the deliverer would come. So that's how God made Abram great, but he had to obey God in order to do that. Now, it says here also, it says, I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. So what he's saying there is, says, I'm going to use you to bless others. And but which others? And that's where we get to the next verse, verse 3. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay, 3 things going on here. He says, I will bless those who bless you. In other words, those who look favorably upon Abraham and his line, I will bless them. I will encourage them. I will come after. I will be a blessing to them because they have remembered you as being in the line of the deliverer, and that you obeyed me. And then I will also curse those who curse you. Curse him who curses you. And so at the same time, people who go against him are not going to make it. They're not going to survive. And we know this, and we'll talk about this at a different time, but there are ramifications, and we'll see this as time goes on. Everybody who goes against Abram and his line, they end up being destroyed, or they end up being minimized to a great degree. But to the ones that bless him, the ones that bless the line of Abraham, they are blessed in the process. So he would say, and then he says, all families of the earth shall be blessed. And so all families would be blessed through what? The line of Abraham, but specifically through the line of this deliverer. This deliverer would be a blessing to everyone. He would be the Redeemer, and he would be the one. He wouldn't redeem just Abraham and his line. He would redeem the whole earth. By that, I mean everybody on earth. Shouldn't say. Abraham's line, even those that are not part of Abraham's line, would still be blessed by him. So all families of the earth would be blessed because the deliverer or the Redeemer would be descendants of Abraham. And this includes, guess who? You and me. So we are blessed because God blessed Abram. And Abram would be also part of that. Now Abram, who was like Abel and Seth and Noah and all those that have that godly line, believed that God would one day send a deliverer and bless the world through him. And that's what would happen. So we get down to verse 4 and 5 in chapter 12. It says this, So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Okay? Now, is Abram completely obeying God? Not quite, because who did he take with him? He took Lot. Remember? Get out from your family and from your father's house. So now he's left his father's house. But his family, his relatives are still there, which is Lot and his family. So he's not quite there, but he's getting there. And so they go to the land of Canaan. They come up to this place. So Abram did not know where he was going. When he left Ur of the Chaldees, God told him, go to a land that I will show you. Abram didn't ask God's opinion on where that was at. He said, okay, Lord, if you say to go, I'll go. And he went. And he left. And so God showed him along the way where he should go. He knew who was leading him, and so he trusted God. He understood who God was. He had a confidence in the character and nature of God, that God would never do anything that was harmful to him, never do anything that wouldn't be a blessing to him, because he had promised already, I will bless you, I will bless all those who bless you, and so on. So he believed, like I said, that God would send a deliverer one day, and he waited for that, and he was willing to wait for that. And the interesting thing is, look what he was willing to give up in order to fulfill this promise. He was willing to give it all up. He left everything, or almost everything, but he's in that process. And so he's willing to leave that. And he has a learning process here going along. He meant leaving his family and friends and all the different things that he had. And so for the rest of his life, from that point on, he lived in tents. Now think about that. I'm sure he had a home. I don't know what the homes looked like there back in Ur of the Chaldees, but whatever it was, I'm sure it was fancy. It was nice. He was wealthy, and yet he chose to live in tents and become a stranger, a pilgrim, if you want to put it that way, go on his way to Canaan. So, in other words, he was willing to wait on God. He waited on God to provide everything that he needed, not only food, but also where to go, what to have, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing to remember, Abram was a sinner, just like you and me. He's a sinner, just like Adam, Noah, Abel, Cain, all of them, all the people in the times of Noah. He was a sinner and he was flawed, just like you and I are. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't more honorable than somebody else, other than he agreed with God, that God was telling the truth. And as a result of that, he believed God. But he didn't leave his father and relatives completely when he left Ur of the Chaldees. So that kind of shows that he was flawed, doesn't it? He didn't leave his family and friends, and he took Lot, and he did not leave Lot when he left Haran. Had he left Lot in Haran, God would have done something even sooner, and we'll find out what that is as time goes on. So in Genesis 12:4 it says this, "So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him." So he wasn't quite listening to the Lord, but he's getting there. So I just want you to understand. Now I'm just kind of building a little bit of history of who Abram is. As time, we're going to spend a few lessons on Abram because it's very, very important, some of the things that are going on here. And remember the land of Canaan, which is today Israel, as a matter of fact. So he's leaving to go to the land of Canaan. God is promising the land of Canaan to Abram and his descendants. So that's where we're at right now. Abram's left, but he still has Lot with him. And next week we're going to be talking about the next thing that God wants him to understand. All right? So I just want to say thank you for listening to the lesson this week. I want you to, please, if you can, tag a friend. I know this is a video podcast that is on YouTube, so please go to, just look up my name, Doug Schaible, and I'll put that on the end, the credits on the end of the podcast here so you can see that. But it's Doug, D-O-U-G, and then Schaible, S-C-H-A-I-B-L-E. Just search for that in YouTube, and you'll find my site, and please subscribe to it if you would. And also my podcasts on Google Play or on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform that you like to use. Just look up Premature Bible Institute, and you'll find it. So that being said, I just want to say thanks, and thanks for listening again. And I'll continue to try catching up on, for the video podcast anyway. I'm trying to catch up more and more on those other ones so that one day they'll all be on video podcasts. So thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.